It's time for the Access of Easy podcast, the weekly technology digest that keeps you ahead of the curve. Brought to you by EasyDNS.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Access of Easy podcast, where we cover the latest and greatest in data breach and overreaching. My name's Joey, that's Len, and we're not going to be able to finish today's show because there's a widespread internet outage. But we're going to try. What's going on, buddy? How the heck?
Not only we're going to start, we're going to finish this show. We're going to do it properly. This outage is not going to affect us. It's a beautiful day, Joey. The weather's beautiful. Sun is shining. Another day, another Singapore dollar, baby.
Another day, another Singapore dollar. I'd love to hear it. Yeah, it's a nice day today. I have a reno going on at my house. So I'm down to one bathroom. All my wife's stuff is in there. All my daughter's stuff is in there. And it's going to go for another week or so, probably. The Link and the Red Hill close this weekend, starting tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
So that's going to be fun. I have a stag to go to tomorrow night and then a football game at 8:30 in the morning the next day. The stag is in Binbrook, the football game on Hamilton Mountain. I'll be driving over the next 2 days for 3 hours, I would guess, close to 3 hours. So, we'll see. We'll see. The Link and the Red Hill here, when they close, it's a mess. It is truly a mess. And, you know, it's just the city in their infinite wisdom does both at the same time. I have not been able to figure out the rationale for this move over the years, but they seem attached to it. So
it's like a Band-Aid. You're going to do it. You just rip the thing off.
I guess. Yeah. Sure.
Don't spread out the pain. Just
that's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is that the city wants to cause, or the workers want to cause max pain in terms of the city's pocketbooks. And so they charge overtime, weekend time, overnight time. If I had to guess.
At least they're not repaving the Red Hill because they paved it once incorrectly.
Yeah.
So I gotta give
people don't know that story. That's fallen into the memory hole. But anyway, stories for another time. Today, let's talk about the quote of the week from last week. The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. That was from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Veronica, congratulations, you got it right, my friend. This week's quote: the universe is filled with magical things, patiently waiting for our wits to grow sharper. If you know who that was by, put it in the comments section. Don't forget, you can only look at the items you find in the park garbage can when you're disposing of your dog's turds to find the answer. No Googling, nothing like that. And if you get the answer right, you get your next round of renewals on Easy DNS, which, hey, not bad. We'll take that. In this economy, we'll take that. We will take it. Len, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the outage? Do you want to start with our friend Michael Geist? Where do you want to start?
We could talk about the outage and it's impacting a few different things. Is it impacting you at all? Because AWS...
It is a bit. So I'm selling broken footballs, as you know, and I was out brushing one earlier today and had, my usual setup: a towel, a brush, a ball, and my phone. Listen to a podcast, listen to some music, and I couldn't get either to work for a bit there. And disappointing to say the least. I think this outage, just doing a little bit of research on my own here, affecting multiple platforms: Google, Spotify, Discord, Twitch, Snapchat, Character.ai, Amazon Web Services, Cloudflare, and others. Up to 13,000 users experiencing issues with Google
Discord
Cloud, and 27,000 more on Spotify. I think it's working a little better now, but we'll see.
I'm getting Discord messages as we speak. So that's
The question isn't is it working? The question is, how well is it working? So you're getting messages, but you don't know if you're getting all of them for sure, and you don't know if you're missing any media.
I could
whatever.
assume.
I don't know.
To be honest, Joey, but the communication here, every once in a while, your video kind of freezes.
Really?
So I'm wondering. Yeah,
See?
I'm not sure if it's my end or your end.
See, I'm telling you, that's what I was joking about this, but this is a cloud-based service, so who knows what these guys are using, right? Are they using Cloudflare or AWS? I have no idea.
Well, but Iran now has nuclear capabilities, right? So are they also able to do it online? Is a nuclear war online?
I don't know.
Did they launch something? Did they press the button? It's now all cloud services. In fact, look, it just goes to show you, if you're relying on cloud services, which somebody else is hosting your data, you're relying on them.
There's no cloud. There is no cloud. There's only your computer or someone else's computer. That's the only two options.
Yeah, so, that's an excellent point. Yeah, there's no cloud, but yeah, they frame it as that. It is there. That's able to connect to at any time until you can't.
Yes, sir.
That's why it's really important for sensitive information. If you can set up a home server and store it there. It's a pain in the rear end to maintain, to keep it up to date, all that stuff. But when crap hits the fan, you're in a much better position because you're only relying on yourself. Yeah. And if you can't trust yourself, who can you trust?
By the way, I don't see Bitcoin on the list of affected services either. So make of that what you will. Where do you want to go next? Some big stories this week, right? The Canadian government one about.
Let's do that.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. We talked about this on our show too. I'd like to talk about it here as well.
Bill C4. Now, I've talked about the naming of these bills in last time on the CBP show.
Yeah. Refresh our memory.
The names that they choose for these bills. I think that they require a rework. This one in particular, because it's Bill C4, an act respecting certain affordability measures for Canadians, and another measure. That's it. And another measure. It ends right there. This is straight from the parliamentary website. I had to
that sounds like my wife assigning me chores on the weekend. I need you to cut the grass, need you to take out the garbage, and one more chore. Unknown, TBD. When you're done those other ones, let's see what else I can give you.
So this bill, it's being introduced by the Liberal Party, and given the fact that they have a quasi-majority in the House of Commons and an actual majority in the Senate, I think this thing could probably fly through unless there's going to be some holdup in a committee somewhere. So with respect to this, I don't think there's going to be much holdup. Let's talk about the particulars in it, because this bill could retroactively exempt federal political parties from privacy protection laws. And these changes could go far back as May 2000, allowing political parties to collect, use, and disclose a whole bunch of personal information. If you have any idea what they can accumulate during an election, it's an insane amount. Your name, your address, your telephone number, potentially your political allegiance. There's a lot of different things that they can get during election time, and it can store this back, going back decades, in fact. And this means that political parties will not be subjected to provincial privacy legislation. They're only required to develop and adhere to their own privacy policies. And these policies must designate a privacy officer.
Thank God. Have you been asked? Have you been nominated?
I have not. Gary, buddy, get on this. Including, no. I don't know what I'm talking about, Gary Shandling, maybe. Including their contact information, outlining the types of personal information that's going to be collected, and explain how this information is going to be used, and describe related employee training. How can this go wrong? You now have another entity that is going to be collecting pertinent information about individuals. The bill also removes requirements for data breach notifications and restrictions on selling personal information. So if ever is a data breach, you may never know. If they plan to sell this stuff, they could do that. I see this. I can't leave fast enough. And I know that there's a court case going on in British Columbia surrounding this, but with respect to this, it's just, I see this. They're including this in an affordability bill.
I love it.
It reminds me.
That is the best part. That is the best part.
Just bury this in it. Like, you ever see the Simpsons episode when they're trying to do some sort of, I think it was funding towards Springfield. And I forget what was happening with Springfield, but they were trying to get some funding that was and they decided to add on an extra stuff in the bill, and they voted it down. And Kento Brockman says that democracy just doesn't work. And it's just another thing. Like, sometimes it just does not work. It just reminds me of a Simpsons episode. Like, just bury. These are major things. Inside an Affordability Act? Come on, man. Like, nothing else to say.
What is there to say about this? I mean, inside of an act about affordability, which is a hot button topic in Canada and much of the Western world now, there is a provision, I guess is the polite way to put this, about whether or not Canadian political parties can use all the data that they want in any way they want, dating back 25 years, Len. 25 years. It's hard for me to put into words how insulting this is, but the best part about all this, the real best part, is that no one is going to care at the public level, the level of the Canadian voter, no one's going to care. It's never going to make it to the dinner table. It's never going to make it to the bar. It's never going to make it anywhere. No one's going to be talking about this. And this is exactly why it's allowed. Guys like Michael Geist, friend of the show, friend of our show as well. You know, we've had him on. He is sounding the alarm on all these things 24/7 now on his podcast. We talked about them on our podcast. He's writing about them on his blog. There are others as well, lawyers on YouTube specifically that I follow that I've been watching and paying attention to as this new Liberal government empties the clip, basically, in terms of eroding privacy for you and making sure that they can do whatever they want with the data as they see fit in the meantime. It's tough, man. It's tough. Like, what do you make of this? So if you're someone who supported a political party or has given data to a political party, you're being targeted in a way, right? For your, I guess, naivete, for your unwavering support of that stripe. I don't know what to say. Now, here's a question for you. You think this is going to affect the number of people who give their information to political parties one way or another? No, is there going to be a news release on this anywhere? I did see that on the border bill, Canadian media organizations, all of whom have turned off their comment section, by the way, to further my point last week about the target that is on the back of private conversation or areas where people can find out that, yeah, everyone actually thinks the same thing I do. I'm not crazy. They're framing the border bill as something that, you know, basically paranoid losers are screaming, snooping about. And this is not going to be covered by that same media outlets or those same media outlets. Like, it's not. And I don't know. To my earlier question, I'll give you a chance to answer. Is this going to affect the way that people support political parties or no?
No, absolutely not. Because they're not going to be aware of it, number one. And number two, it changes nothing. It's because I'm not sure if things have changed in the past while, but from what I recall, voters lists are given out to each of the candidates within the ridings. Mm-hmm. And those voters lists encompasses every voter within that particular riding. Now, if you're going to be able to store that information, every voter from that riding for the last 25 years, and then you have their names, their telephone numbers, their addresses. And so there's a lot of companies out there that would love to get their hands on information. I'm not talking about through theft, just even through purchasing of it. Mm-hmm. And what better way to recoup costs, campaign costs, than to sell this information, especially for those parties that don't win, because they're going to get very little funding moving forward. I'm looking at the NDP party. And so it just makes sense for them to try to recoup costs somewhere on each riding association, each ride. It just makes sense. There's a lot of information that they could sell. Yeah. And people are going to be unaware because you know what? These guys are getting the information regardless if you care or I don't care, Joey. They just get it because, well, this is the way things operate.
Yeah. Just want to note that the Affordability Act that it's talking about, that Professor Geist is mentioning and that, you know, we're talking about, this is the bill that lowers the marginal PIT, the personal income tax rate for most Canadians or lowest income Canadians, I guess, from 14.5 to 14. So the idea that you'd vote against this obviously is like an affront to the cost of living crisis if you're a liberal and you're trying to frame this in the media. It's also a GST housing rebate for first-time home buyers. You know, it's hard, man. It's like Prime Minister Carney is, he is focused and cunning in a way that Prime Minister Trudeau was not. I'll just say that.
TED Talks.
Let's do it. Yeah, sure. The worst things in the world, by the way. TED Talks are the hub for liberal tears these days. TED Talks once upon a time were so cool, and now they're just full of like overweight losers lecturing you on why being overweight's a good thing and similar subject matter. It's terrible. They're all terrible to watch.
Well, the idea of it is trying to foster open dialogue and challenge ideas.
Okay. That's from the website. From the website.
Right. Well, unfortunately, it looks like they may be going against this based on this information trying to suppress somebody's voice. And it's
Shocker, Len. Shocker.
Professor Gigi Foster, and she is the professor at the University of New South Wales, the School of Economics, recently gave a TEDx talk called The Manipulator's Playbook. And just the title of the it's going to tell you exactly which way things. And she was talking about how fear and conformity could be used to manipulate public behavior. And she used the example of COVID-19 pandemic.
Perfect.
Like that. And the talk eventually was rejected by TED's U.S. headquarters, and they were citing that potential contentious statements were included here. And with this being said, people are complaining that there's censorship. That, like I mentioned, their mission statement is to try to foster dialogue and open ideas and challenging ideas. And by doing this, it's, well, I don't know. It seems like Professor Foster, she has been critical of mainstream narratives and saying that they were unfairly used against people, and now she is being unfairly treated as a result of anything. She says it's almost like what they were doing in the past. They're manufacturing enemies of the state, and now she appears to be one. So essentially, like almost a deplatforming type of thing. Like when you're dealing with a centralized entity, now in this case, TED is one, Google is another one, YouTube. I know they're the same entities. X, formerly, especially before Elon purchased it. You have a platform in which they can change the narrative however they want. They have every right to do so. They own it. But you can't go ahead and say, well, it's open and we're going to allow all ideas to be discussed. It's not the case. You are trying to suppress one message and push another. If you say that openly, that's fine. But you can't say that you're fair, you're neutral, and you're transparent. It's not the case here. And what else can I say about this?
This is, again, like, I feel like I'm a hammer and everything I see is a nail, but you cannot tell me that this is not in keeping with the message and the theme that I said earlier and last week, that dissenting conversations, especially those ones held where people can look at each other and say, wow, I'm not crazy, other people actually think this too, they are becoming a target. And the COVID pandemic era was like the Twilight Zone. People talking about how the research into the vaccines was enough and everyone was getting these things. And, I got 2 shots myself. We wanted to travel. My wife and I, we got married during COVID. And I regret every bit of propaganda that I either parroted or fell victim to, especially when it was early and I was scared, like many people. I'm sure some people listening, watching, this show were scared as well. But I wised up, and I think you are in the same boat, and a lot of people are in the same boat, that there was a hand significantly overplayed during that pandemic. And it's one that now frames a lot of the way sane people look at messaging in the media, messaging from establishment institutions like the Federal Reserve, like National Institute for Health, like PHAC here in Canada, like, your provincial health officer, like, you name it. And I think it goes as far, Len, as things like what's being taught in elementary schools, what's being taught in universities. It goes, to really walk a thin line here, people now questioning historical events in a way that just was not allowed even 5 years ago. And whether you agree or disagree with these people is beside the point. The point is that there was a watershed moment during COVID that Gigi Foster is trying to point to as an example of why it's important to understand when and how manipulation happens and what role crowd control, that's a phrase that I'm using, it's not her phrase, plays in that. And I just want to note that Brownstone Institute actually has the talk, that the text from the talk, you can listen to it for free. And it looks like there's a video as well. I didn't watch the video, but it looks like you can actually watch the talk at a TEDx conference, which is an offshoot of the TED name that happens in smaller venues, smaller towns, et cetera, with less prominent figures. So I think you should watch it. And, it's kind of going to fall on deaf ears for people who need to hear it, like most things. And the people who don't need to hear it will be talking about it in their circles where everyone already agrees. And so the polarization of society will continue, and that flywheel spins until, I don't know, something happens. But for now, I think this is just going to continue to be a divisive issue. What role did you play during COVID, and did you play it knowingly, or were you a rube? There's a lot of people who should be asking themselves that question even 5 years later.
And you could just erase history if you don't like it. Like that person from New Zealand, for instance. I don't want to say who. That person is doing a good job at that. But Google. Let's
Do
talk
we?
about
No,
Google
never
again.
mind. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hey, I don't know who I'm talking about.
Yeah,
It's
we'll skip
the
that.
rugby
Yeah.
guy. I don't know, or maybe not. Yeah, so Google looks like they closed the door on one security flaw that could expose the private numbers associated with users' accounts. I had no idea this was even a flaw
Crazy.
out there. That's
Yeah.
pretty bad. And the vulnerability was discovered by security researchers, and this allowed attackers to gain access to the recovery phone number for nearly any Google account without alerting the owner. And the exploit involved a quote unquote chain attack that used a JavaScript version of Google's username recovery form. And it took some work as one needed to bypass anti-bot protections and the rate limits, but a researcher was able to systemically guess telephone numbers. And worst of all, the process could be automated. And it was some reports saying that a phone number could be brute forced in as little as 20 minutes, depending on the country and the number length. If you go to Europe, for instance, those numbers are quite long. Here in Canada, you're only 10, right, over here. So this could lead to a variety of privacy and security risk, because now if somebody's able to figure out a telephone number, now you could get targeted phishing attacks, social engineering maybe, or maybe even a SIM swap attack, which happens. We hear about this all the time here in Canada, and that could lead to an unauthorized access to a particular account. Google confirmed that they resolved the issue, and they rewarded the researchers who found this, and they gave them a $5,000 bounty. Seems pretty low to me, but at least they got something out of this.
Do you have I don't ever put the recovery number in my Google account. I always use a separate email for the recovery service. And nowadays I'm using what is it called? The passkey or whatever, where you need a second device actually to sign in if you forget your password. I don't want anyone being able to use my email or use my phone number. I want you to actually have to steal something from me or be, in front of a hardware device that I have access to get access. I think that's the safest way to do it. I'm curious, when was the last time you even used the recovery phone number for anything?
I don't know, but I think for signing up for a new account, you don't. I just signed up for one for the football review channel not long ago, and you don't need it. You can use another email. Yeah. So it's like, now that said, almost every time I sign out and in, I am asked if I want to add a recovery phone number, but I have not done it. And so far, it's not been a problem. I certainly won't be doing it after this. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, I'm curious who's still doing this. Why would you, in the age of AI, Google should be getting rid of this altogether. We've already heard so many stories about social engineering, but now you also have AI that can reproduce the voice of your grandmother, your cousin, your daughter, your wife, whatever. Babe, I need your Google password. I have to sign in and check something from an Amazon order. Can you give it to me? Yeah, sure, babe. No problem. Here it is. Bang. Gone. Your Coinbase account, gone. Your Amazon account loaded up with big screen TVs going to the Philippines. Like the number of ways you can get got by giving your phone number out is insane. And this only happens when you talk on the phone to a support line, fake person, whatever. I'm a millennial, Len, and I don't pick up the phone for any number I don't recognize ever. It never even crosses my mind. Everything gets screened because my friends and family can text me, it's just a standard sort of behavioral tick now for people my age. So I will also note before I pass it back to you, who is this targeting, Len? I don't know, but if I'm in danger and I get access to a random telephone number, I'm not calling you, Mr. Joey Tweets, because you're not going to answer my telephone number. So
we need to have a hostage word, I think, you and me. I don't know what it will be. Maybe cuck, but I can't be getting cuck messages late at night from you. Okay, my phone's on the bedside table. I can't have that.
I'll make sure to only do it during your lunch hour.
Yeah, please, please.
All right, let's talk about some more security things. Microsoft, there was a security boot bypass that existed. And what is a security boot? It's a security feature that ensures your computer only boots with software that is digitally signed by a trusted source. And Microsoft worked to patch one of these loopholes in the security boot bypass, and it was done in the June 2025 patch. But They did it for one. Another one still remains unpatched. And so the first issue that has been patched, it's from CVE-2025-3052 for people who want to look into this. And the vulnerability allowed attackers to execute unsigned code early in the boot process, and it would bypass the security boot, and it could compromise the system's chain of trust before the operating system even loads. And this is pretty damning that this vulnerability has been around since late 2022. And so Microsoft finally got around to it, patched it up, and they did it. So also,
they're treating it like a cleaning the garage type chore. They finally got around to it. We'll get to it when we have time. Yeah.
Well, it's all good. So, but the second secure boot bypass, it's called hydrophobia, and I know that they're using the letter 0 instead of an O in one of the O's there. I kind of like the name because of the fact this applies to systems that are using inside H2O firmware. So hydrophobia for inside H2O firmware stuff, I kind of like that. That's pretty.
Are you rating it? Are we doing a rating here?
I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5.
Wow.
I'm giving it. I kind of like it.
That's the most you've ever talked about a name, and I'm surprised it only got 3.5. I'm not sure like how much further do they have to go to get a 4 or a 5 from you.
If it didn't have the letter 0, I would have given it more.
It's leet speak. Like, what do you want?
Exactly. I don't want to see this leet stuff. So because it's there, it lost a little bit of points from the French judge.
Just want to remind everybody, this is a show about cyber security generally, and so the expectation that we will not see leet speak, very unrealistic for my co-host. We may never see a 4 or a 5 on this program from Len.
It may not happen. Yeah. Anyways, what do we ever do? Anyways, this beauty of an exploit is an unprotected NVRAM variable that allows digital certificate injection, and it could lead to potential arbitrary code execution at the firmware level. So Microsoft's patch doesn't address this one because this is vulnerability within inside H2O firmware, and that requires updates from the device manufacturer rather than Microsoft directly. So that's pretty damn interesting. So they're gonna have to work on this from the inside H2O people. These patches that came out in June also fixes a 0-day vulnerability in the web distribution authoring stuff. So it does a lot of other things that is helping out people within the Microsoft ecosystem. I was already has in Windows is pretty good at doing it by itself, but if it's not, make sure you're doing these updates pretty regularly. So again, like not much else to say about this one. It's just I like the name, like pretty cool.
Universally trusted certificates, the culprit again, Len. Secure boot's a weird feature in Microsoft systems. I like when you use secure boot, generally you're making a change to the BIOS or other like core Windows functionality. It's been a while since I used secure boot, but there are times where you want to use it. And then I think as well, you'd use it if you need a secure environment on your desktop. There may be other times you would employ this, but yeah, I mean, I can't really go any further than that. The thing that I want to point out is that it took them 3 years to close the gap here. Pretty damning, right? We talk a lot about how there's no laws on disclosure, timeframe gaps. There's no requirement to reimburse people for potential hardship or vulnerability or whatever. And yet here we are talking about something that was a problem in 2022 that's now, I guess, no longer a problem, but you may not feel like that if you're a Microsoft user who relies on these things for your livelihood or your network security or, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. Microsoft, by the way, as a company seems to be glowing as far as its stock price, as far as its place in the ecosystem. I would say Apple floundering a bit, Google floundering a bit from product standpoint. Apple, who we'll talk about next, is I think in a little bit of trouble. And Google obviously discussing that I think last quarter for the first time ever, their search numbers went down quarter to quarter. Yeah. And so they're trying to spin it as more people are using our AI product, but I think it's a number of things. And I think, the politicization of those search engines is not to be ignored. Anyway, Microsoft, for all the problems it's had, seems to be it's mission focused in a way these other companies are not. And so while I am disappointed that this was not resolved sooner, I never have to worry about Microsoft being political, it seems. Have we ever talked about Microsoft being political on this show?
Yeah. Didn't they have their internal AI team that was doing some sort of investigating on how the code was? I can't remember the specifics, but
was it them?
I believe it was Microsoft.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So maybe.
But not only that, if they go further too, they're very heavily involved in video games with their Xbox, and they purchased Bethesda, and I forget who else they purchased. And
Blizzard, they own Blizzard Activision too.
Yeah, I forgot them. So in video games, they could be politicized as well. They could. I mean, I sent you something about Civilization not too long ago, Civilization 7, that shows off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
for Axis. They blew that one. I still play that game, but yeah, it could be a lot better. Anyway, the point I was going to make is just that, like, as far as surface area for issues, it seems like Microsoft has the smallest one at the moment. Apple's is getting bigger, Google's is getting bigger, and these guys seem to be uninterested, honestly, compared to their competitors in the broader, political AI / whatever landscape. Even though this is a shortcoming, we've talked a lot more about these other companies over the last year than Microsoft.
Apple.
Let's do it. Last one. Interesting. I have a few thoughts on this.
Well, Apple Intelligence is what we're going to be talking about primarily right now. And to be honest, I've never heard.
It's even the people who have iPhones probably have not heard of it because they never use it. Because they never use it. It's an absolutely awful product. Awful.
Okay, I thought it was my sheer ignorance because I don't have an Apple product, and if I don't have an Apple product, it's hard for me to understand what's in there. So I didn't realize that Apple Intelligence seems to be a fumble by them. But either way, this is supposed to be a new suite of generative AI features. And what they're trying to do with this is they're rolling it out, and it hopefully is going to be enhancing the user experience for people using iPhones, iPads, and even desktop users like the Mac users out there. And the enhancement, they say, comes with prioritizing user privacy. Well, does it? Because the data gathered through these inputs, they're supposed to be on-device processing, which means the information is not sent back to the mothership. Everything is done within the system that you're using, remains on the device, and all personal information is not sent anywhere. And if that is not enough, hypothetically, you need more oomph to get stuff done, more horsepower, you can use what they call the cloud compute and for more complex stuff. And that is a server-based intelligence. It's designed to handle advanced requests, and they claim your privacy is respected as well as your security. They say that data relevant to the specific task is processed on Apple's Silicon servers, and ultimately the data is not stored by them and not accessible by Apple until Uncle Sam comes calling, and I guess they can get anything they want at that point. But they say all stuff is ultimately deleted by them. So I don't know what to believe with that, because it's a trust me bro type thing. But to be honest, all these AI things are trust me bro. You are asking them something, and hopefully you're not giving them anything that will incriminate you later on with every query that you submit. So with respect to this Apple stuff, this Apple Intelligence, as I said, I'm not an Apple user, so I have no firsthand knowledge with this, so I can't give you any in-depth knowledge about this. Sounds like you have something. I'd like to hear your point of view and your experience with it.
Yeah, I actually just don't think this matters because the product is so bad. Nobody wants local AI as far as things like translation and ChatGPT integration. Like, there's apps for that are better. Like, there's no native Apple LLM that does a good job. A year or 2 years ago, as part of Apple's either iPhone presentation or WWDC, their Worldwide Developers Conference presentation, they gave a whole set of slides on how the iPhone was going to have on board this AI engine that would add context and sort of streamline and simplify basic things that you do with your phone every day. And it was really good. It was a presentation that I was excited about, and I think a lot of iPhone users were excited about, because Apple's usually on the tip of the spear when it comes to this sort of thing. As far as ease of use, maybe it doesn't do 100 things, but it does 50 things really well, or 25 things really well. And this has been the iPhone story for a long time. basically since Samsung started to make phones or Google made the Nexus phone for the first time. This was a story with iPhones. During the presentation, it was easy stuff, Len. Like you're texting your friend about going for Chinese and, a native bubble pops up in the text message. I think it was iMessage only. So you're texting a friend who also has an iPhone, and a native bubble pops up in the iPhone message and says, here are a few Chinese places near you, and there's table times at 3 of them for tonight. Do you want to book one? Sure. That's great. Stuff like, do you want to go to see this movie tonight? Yeah, I'll be there in an hour. And Maps comes up and tells you, well, there's traffic. It might take you an hour and 20 minutes. That kind of stuff is probably pretty easy to do, number one, and really has both like a presentation oomph and a ease of use for your daily life oomph. Like there's a lot of punch in those two features, for example. And those were in the presentation, among other things. Things like, on in-message lists and invites and stuff like that. Easy things that make a lot of sense. They failed to deliver on every single thing. The Apple Intelligence platform is brutal on the phone. You can type in things in Siri or ask Siri stuff and it just says, do you want me to ask ChatGPT, or here's what I found on the internet? And it's like, they don't read you the answer. Nothing is contextualized. It's brutal. So I don't think they're going to be able to pull this off, number one. Number two, without knowing what the data retention policy is at Apple for stuff like third-party queries, right? Then I don't know, to your point, if Uncle Sam comes calling in a year, are you still going to have it? If they come calling in 2 years, are you still going to have it? I don't believe in things like IP obfuscation. I don't think it's really possible to do that. I'm thinking about particularly here in Canada, where your ISP has to tell the government who you're connecting to, how you're connecting, where you're connecting. This will obviously extend to your cell phone because the ISPs and phone providers here are the same 100% of the time. There's no other option here like there is in the States. So, and I don't believe that. And, saying stuff like we're going to have real-time translation. There's already, like I said, with GPT, there's apps that do this better. Like Google Translate does it better. There's other options out there that'll do it better. Duolingo might even have a live translator now. I don't know. I have that on my phone. I haven't looked at it in a while. But the idea that Apple is going to deliver on something that's some grand promise after the last few years is really, I don't think, something to hold your breath over. And I'll go a step further, Len. Apple at their recent developer conference day presentation talked a bit about AI, but you know where they spent the majority of the conversation? Talking about something called the Glass UI that's coming in the next iteration of the Apple iOS, Apple TV, Apple Watch operating systems, where when you're using something in sort of the foreground of the phone, for example, your dock, the background behind the dock will look like it's behind glass. Nobody is asking for that. What we're asking for is like better battery life, AI onboarding, stuff like that, or AI onboard the phone, and instead we're getting sort of crappy UI functionality that, by the way, is going to drain the battery and tax the system. Like, if everything looks like it's behind glass and warps and has light effects like it's real life, in their words, that doesn't make the phone better. It makes the phone worse. And so
that's in the beta. That from what I gather, I don't have a great deal of knowledge in this subject. That's currently in beta. So what we're getting now is user feedback to that glass.
They're going to do it. They're not going to not do it.
You think so? You think that it's
yeah, definitely.
So yeah. I'm not sure.
They may tune it. They may tune it or say, if you want to reduce the effect, you can reduce the effect. But the question is like, the question is more one of directionality. Like, what are you focused on? Where's your attention right now? Is it on that it costs $30,000 for a fully loaded Mac when you can get the same machine with the Windows OS for $5,000? Is it on that other phones are overtaking you in terms of like photo functionality, which was your cake, your bread and butter for a long time? Now Google phones are undoubtedly better at AI cleanup and things like that on the photo side. Is your focus on battery life, where the battery life in your phones has been so bad? And by the way, you just settled a battery lawsuit, 4 years ago, for intentionally ruining battery life on some phones? I mean, or I should say ruining UI on some phones, or user experience, not user interface, to protect the battery on some phones. Like, these guys are, I think, out to lunch a little bit. And they have to refocus because there's too many competitors. We're entering into, I think, an era of modular computing that's not yet to materialize, but is not far off. And the competition in the flagship phone space is going to be significant. There's already competition from like Oppo, OnePlus, Xiaomi, Huawei. And people, like you said before, Len, I think people care more about privacy than they have before. And they may look at this and say, yeah, this is a straw too much for my camel's back, right? So we'll see. We'll see. I don't have a lot of faith in any of this stuff coming to fruition, number one, in the way they're describing. And number two, the privacy thing, unless it's stuff like, protecting me from advertisers, which my phone does well. I know it does it well because the ads I get are terrible. But like other than that, I just don't think they have the chops to deliver on this stuff. They're over promising and they're under delivering with some, shiny presentation every year around September with the phones. That's what their model is.
I'm far from an Apple fanboy. Obviously, I don't use any other products, but the one thing they do well, at least I have faith in them doing well, is providing on the user experience. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're going to work around some of these flaws and improve things for the end user to make it look and appear better. As for in terms of like securing your privacy and your security, I have zero faith in them doing it better than you doing it yourself with doing something. But anyways, that's first thing. The second thing I just have to really just point out is that to hide your VPN, hide your IP, the VPN does it well. If you do it properly, because I know you say your ISP, but this creates a tunnel with the VPN company and encrypts the data. And so the ISP doesn't get that data unless they were able to unencrypt
just between
it
you and the device. Yeah, that's the story.
It does it in such a way, like say your phone has it for an example, and if you want to, I don't know what it's called, when you want to share so people could connect to your phone and use the internet.
Oh, hotspot.
It's a hotspot. When you use you can even set it up so like the hotspot is used in VPN or not using VPN. Like there's lots of different options you can do, but it's preventing, as long as you do it right. If you're going to use a computer that it's connected to an account and you're doing searches, look, Google's going to find out who you are regardless if you're using a VPN or not, just simply because you're logged in and your habits of searching stuff online. But if you use something like Mulvad browser or something like a Tor browser and you do some searches through that, it's very, very difficult with a proper VPN. It's very difficult to find out exactly who's searching for what. And in fact, if you try using Google search engine with like a Tor browser, a lot of times it's very difficult to use it. It puts so many barriers for you to use it. It's going to ask you to click which are the cars, and it creates all these questions you have to. It just makes it hard to use it, but you could still hide if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So like there's ways to do it, but that's more food for thought.
That's it for today, everybody. Latest and greatest.
A little bit long.
Overreaching. That's all right. Good conversation as always with you, buddy. So we're back next week. Make sure you, in the meantime, like, subscribe, share all that stuff to the newsletter, the YouTube channel, the podcast. accessofeasy.com is where you can read the rest of the stories. And I'm going to go get some sushi. So until next time, take care of yourselves.
Good evening.